The night had settled over Los Angeles like a heavy velvet curtain, draping the city in a strange mix of beauty and loneliness. The bright neon lights of storefronts hummed with electric color, while the faint smell of gasoline and street food mingled in the cool air. Keanu Reeves, wearing his usual understated black jacket and simple jeans, walked with a quiet, unhurried pace down the nearly empty boulevard. He had just wrapped up a long day on set, but unlike other celebrities who might retreat into mansions or surround themselves with an entourage, Keanu preferred the stillness of these midnight walks. The city at night gave him space to think, to breathe. He moved like a shadow blending into the sidewalks, unnoticed by most, his mind wandering through thoughts of his past, of loss, survival, and the small joys that made life worth living. It was during this quiet moment that his eyes fell upon a figure seated against the cold brick wall of an abandoned storefront. The man was thin, wrapped in layers of tattered jackets and threadbare blankets. His hair was unkempt, his face partially hidden beneath a hood, but his eyes carried the weary glaze of someone who had spent countless nights under the open sky. A small cardboard sign rested beside him, written in shaky marker, "Hungry. Anything helps." The man wasn't begging loudly or approaching strangers. Instead, he sat with a quiet dignity, hands folded, as if trying to remain invisible to a world that had already discarded him. Keanu slowed his steps. His heart tugged in that familiar way it always did when he encountered suffering stripped down to its rawest form. He knew that kind of pain, loss, isolation, being unseen. For a brief moment, their eyes met, and Keanu offered the man a soft nod, the kind of acknowledgement most passers-by denied him. Just as Keanu was about to step closer, laughter broke through the quiet night. A group of young men, loud, brash, and brimming with careless arrogance, emerged from around the corner. They carried fast food bags and sodas, their conversations a messy blend of inside jokes and crude remarks. Their energy was the opposite of the calm surrounding Keanu and the homeless man. The leader, a tall man with a slick haircut and an inflated sense of confidence, noticed the homeless figure first. A smirk crept across his face, and he nudged his friends with an elbow, whispering something that sent them into a chorus of laughter. Their footsteps quickened, their voices rising, like predators catching sight of easy prey. Keanu's muscles tensed, his instincts sharpening, though outwardly he remained composed. He knew what was coming before it happened, the cruel entertainment of mocking someone who had already lost so much. The group came to a stop just a few feet away from the man. One of them held up his phone, already recording, while another crumpled a fast food wrapper and tossed it toward him. "Yo, man," the leader sneered, leaning down with a grin that dripped arrogance. "How much for a song? You play guitar. Oh wait, you don't even have one." His friends erupted in laughter. The homeless man didn't respond. His eyes dropped back to the ground, his shoulders curling inward as if he could shield himself from their words. Keanu's jaw tightened. He had seen this kind of cruelty before, the kind that wasn't born of true malice, but of emptiness, of people needing to tear down others to feel bigger themselves. The silence of the night, once calming, now felt heavy with tension. Every second the mockery continued. It pressed harder against Keanu's patience. For now, he watched. He didn't rush forward, didn't explode in fury the way action films might have trained the world to expect from him. Instead, he allowed the scene to play out in front of him, his dark eyes never leaving the bully's face. He wanted to see the full extent of this performance, to understand just how far the bully would go when he believed no one would stop him. In the shadows of neon light and broken street lamps, Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the sidewalk like a storm contained, quiet but inevitable. The city hummed around them, unaware of the confrontation building on this forgotten corner, unaware that the man they mocked had just gained the most unexpected ally possible. The leader of the group stepped closer, his sneakers scraping against the cracked pavement as though he were entering a stage built only for his cruelty. The air around him seemed to thicken with the weight of his arrogance, and his friends gathered behind him like an audience eager for a show. He crouched down in front of the homeless man, smirking, his eyes gleaming with that smug confidence born from never having been truly tested in life. "What's the matter, old man?" he jeered, his tone laced with mock pity. "City too expensive for you? Couldn't keep up with the rent? Or maybe you just gave up, huh?" He reached into his pocket, pulled out a handful of loose change, and let it fall to the ground deliberately, the coins scattering like tiny metallic insults at the man's feet. "Here," he added mockingly, "don't spend it all in one place." The homeless man didn't move to pick them up. He simply lowered his head further, as if shrinking beneath the weight of the words. The crowd of friends behind the bully howled with laughter. One of them pulled out his phone, the lens aimed like a weapon, capturing every moment of the humiliation. "Yo, this is gold," the cameraman chuckled. "Post this online and it's gonna blow up. Hashtag street entertainment." The others egged on their leader, their laughter loud and grating against the silence of the night. Another of them tossed a crumpled fry container at the man, hitting him squarely in the chest. "Hey, eat up," he mocked. "Bet that's the best meal you've had all week." The cruelty wasn't just in their words, but in the casualness of it, in the way they treated another human being's suffering as nothing more than a fleeting joke, disposable entertainment for their boredom. It was the kind of cruelty that burned deeper than fists or weapons, because it stripped dignity away in front of others. Keanu, standing just a few feet away now, felt his fists clench inside his jacket pockets. He could hear his own heartbeat, steady but growing louder, like a drum roll before the storm. His dark eyes never left the scene, absorbing every smirk, every word, every burst of cruel laughter. He wasn't just watching the bully torment the homeless man, he was reading him. Keanu had seen faces like this before, both in Hollywood and in life. Men who thought power came from stepping on others, who mistook loudness for strength and humiliation for dominance. There was no creativity in their cruelty, no originality. It was empty, hollow, the kind of ugliness that always revealed itself under the smallest light of truth. But still, Keanu didn't step in yet. He waited, his silence deliberate. He wanted the bully's arrogance to reach its peak, to climb so high in its performance that the inevitable fall would be impossible to cushion. The homeless man finally lifted his head slightly, his lips trembling as he whispered something barely audible. "Please, just leave me alone." His voice cracked like old wood, a sound that carried not just fear, but years of exhaustion, years of being unseen and unheard. The plea wasn't loud enough to stir sympathy from the bullies. It was fuel. The leader burst into exaggerated laughter, clutching his stomach as though he had just heard the funniest joke of his life. "Leave you alone? Man, you're lucky we even noticed you. Otherwise, you'd just be sitting here invisible, like trash no one wants to look at." He leaned closer, his face inches away from a homeless man's, his grin wide and venomous. "People like you, you're nothing. You don't matter. You're just background." His words dripped with cruelty, each one striking harder than the last. The group roared again, their voices echoing against the empty buildings, bouncing into the night as if the city itself were forced to listen. But not everyone laughed. A few pedestrians down the street slowed their steps, their curiosity drawn by the commotion. Their eyes flickered with discomfort, some shaking their heads but not intervening, others quietly pulling out their phones. In the middle of it all, Keanu remained still, though his presence was beginning to shift. He wasn't just another bystander. There was a weight to his silence, a storm brewing behind the calm lines of his face. He was watching, yes, but he was also deciding how to turn this cruelty into a lesson so sharp, so undeniable, that it would leave scars not just on the bully's pride, but on the conscience of everyone who had laughed along. The bully didn't know it yet, but the stage he thought he controlled was about to collapse beneath him. The bully's laughter rang out like an echoing insult to the night, reverberating through the empty street, until it was suddenly interrupted, not by words, but by movement. Keanu Reeves, who had been standing silently in the periphery, finally stepped forward. His approach was calm, deliberate, almost unnervingly quiet. The soles of his boots brushed softly against the pavement, each step measured, each one carrying with it an invisible weight that slowly shifted the atmosphere. The group didn't notice him at first, their attention consumed by their cruel performance, but the homeless man's tired eyes flickered upward. He saw a tall figure in dark clothing approaching, his face partially shadowed under the dim glow of a flickering streetlight. For the first time that night, the man's gaze carried something other than despair. It carried a flicker of hope, faint and fragile, like a candle shielded against the wind. When Keanu came to a stop, he positioned himself not in front of the bully but beside the homeless man, lowering himself just slightly so he wasn't towering over him. It wasn't an act of dominance, it was an act of solidarity. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a folded bill, and pressed it gently into the man's hand without a word. The bully finally noticed, his smirk faltering as confusion replaced amusement. "Yo, who the hell are you?" he demanded, straightening up, trying to puff his chest to maintain control of the scene. His friends turned their phones toward Keanu now, sensing something was happening, but not yet realizing who exactly they were recording. Keanu didn't answer the bully immediately. Instead, he looked at him with a kind of calm intensity that was sharper than anger. His silence wasn't passive, it was penetrating, the kind that made people uncomfortable because it reflected their own ugliness back at them. The bully laughed again, though the sound was more forced this time. "What? You his guardian angel or something?" he sneered, motioning at the homeless man. "Man, you don't know this guy. He's nothing. A nobody. We're just having a little fun. You really gonna get in the way of that?" His voice was louder now, more defensive, trying to reclaim the authority he had just lost without even realizing it. Keanu tilted his head slightly, his gaze unwavering, his voice finally breaking the silence. Calm, steady, but carrying a razor's edge of truth. "You call this fun?" he asked. The words weren't shouted. They weren't aggressive, but the weight of them fell heavy, cutting through the laughter of the bully's friends. It was the kind of question that left no easy answer, because beneath it was a mirror, forcing the bully to see himself, even if only for a moment. The leader scoffed, glancing back at his group as if to rally their laughter again, but the energy had shifted. A couple of them lowered their phones, uncomfortable now, their smirks fading under the quiet authority of the man standing before them. Keanu stepped closer, just enough to shorten the space between himself and the bully. His voice remained even, almost gentle, but each word carried an unshakable gravity. "You think strength is humiliating someone who's already struggling. But that's not strength, it's weakness. Real strength is using what you have to lift others, not crush them." The words hit like invisible blows, not physical, but moral, landing harder than fists could have. The bully blinked, his confidence faltering, his laughter gone. The silence that followed was louder than any insult, a silence that belonged entirely to Keanu now. The homeless man stared up at him, bewildered, his lips parting as if to say something but no sound coming. For years he had been invisible, reduced to background noise in a city that never stopped moving. But here, with this stranger shielding him from cruelty, he felt seen again. Keanu turned back briefly, placing a steady hand on the man's shoulder, an unspoken gesture of respect, before looking once more at the bully. His eyes were calm, but unflinching. "How you treat the weakest defines who you are," he said softly, his voice carrying into the night like a verdict. And though the words were quiet, they resonated through the street with the force of a hammer falling on stone. The air grew still, heavy with an almost tangible silence, as if the entire city had paused to watch what would happen next. Keanu didn't flinch, didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to unravel the bully's performance, like pulling a single thread from a poorly stitched costume. The leader tried to chuckle, tried to wave it off with a shrug, but his laughter cracked under its own weight. The confidence that had dripped so easily from his voice only minutes before was evaporating. His friends, once a chorus of encouragement, now shifted uncomfortably, their smirks gone, their phones lowering. What had started as entertainment was slowly twisting into something else, something humiliating, but not for the man they had mocked. For the first time, the bully was aware of eyes watching him not with admiration, but with judgment. And Keanu, calm and steady, stood at the center, the unshakable contrast to his crumbling bravado. Keanu reached into his jacket again, not with a flourish but with quiet purpose. He pulled out his wallet, the edges worn from years of use, and slid out a thick bill. Without hesitation, he knelt down in front of the homeless man, lowering himself until their eyes were level. It was a simple gesture, but in that moment, it spoke louder than any speech. He handed the man the money, pressing it into his palm firmly, and then did something that shifted the entire atmosphere. He extended his hand. Not out of pity, not out of charity, but out of respect, as one human being to another. The homeless man's eyes widened, shimmering with disbelief, before his trembling hand met Keanu's. That single handshake carried with it the weight of dignity restored, the kind of recognition that no amount of cruelty could strip away again. Around them, the onlookers who had gathered began to murmur, phones lifting again, but this time not to record a cheap laugh. They were capturing a moment of quiet power. The bully's smirk collapsed completely, his cheeks flushing red as he realized the narrative had turned. He was no longer the ringleader of a joke, he was the punchline. His friends, once loyal shadows, began to back away slightly, glancing nervously at the cameras now trained on them. The same phones they had intended to use to humiliate someone else were now documenting their shame, broadcasting their cruelty for the world to see. One of them muttered under his breath, "Man, let's just go," his tone uneasy, the laughter long gone. But the leader couldn't let go of his pride so easily. "What, you think you're some kind of hero?" he snapped at Keanu, his voice strained. "This doesn't change anything. He's still trash." The words rang out hollow, stripped of their bite. They sounded desperate now, desperate to claw back some semblance of control. Keanu turned his head slowly, fixing the bully with a gaze so steady it was almost unbearable. He didn't shout, didn't argue, he didn't need to. "No," Keanu said quietly, his voice calm but resonant, "the only trash here is how you chose to act tonight." The sentence fell like a gavel, final and inescapable. A wave of whispers rippled through the small crowd that had gathered, people nodding, some even clapping softly. The bully looked around, realizing he wasn't surrounded by laughter anymore, but by eyes that condemned him. The instant karma was brutal, not delivered by fists or violence, but by the collapse of the very stage he had built for himself. He had wanted an audience, and now he had one, but instead of applause, he was receiving judgment. His friends exchanged looks, then one by one, they peeled away from his side, leaving him exposed, alone under the spotlight he had craved. The homeless man, clutching the money and still reeling from the surreal turn of events, whispered a broken "thank you" to Keanu, his voice raw with gratitude. Keanu gave him a gentle nod, squeezing his shoulder once before rising back to his full height. He didn't look triumphant, didn't revel in the downfall of the bully, because true revenge, Keanu understood, wasn't about gloating. It was about restoring balance, about ensuring dignity triumphed over cruelty. As he stood there, the bully shifted awkwardly, his bravado shattered, his silence louder than any insult he could have thrown. The lesson had been delivered, and it wasn't one he, or anyone watching, would forget any time soon. The street was hushed now, the neon signs buzzing faintly in the background, the laughter long gone. The bully stood frozen, his face pale beneath the dim streetlight, his chest heaving in the quiet aftermath of his own humiliation. His friends had slipped away one by one, unwilling to share in his downfall. The phone still hovered, recording, but they no longer centered on him. They captured Keanu Reeves standing tall beside the homeless man, a symbol of dignity and unshakable calm. For the first time that night, the bully wasn't the one commanding attention. He was just another man, stripped of bravado, forced to face the reflection of his cruelty in the eyes of strangers who would carry this moment with them long after the night ended. Keanu didn't move immediately. He let the silence linger, a silence heavier than any shouted condemnation could have been. Finally, he turned back to the homeless man, giving him a small, reassuring smile. "You're not invisible," Keanu said softly, his voice low but strong enough for everyone to hear. "Don't let anyone make you believe otherwise." The man blinked rapidly, his lips parting, but no words came, only tears that slipped quietly down his cheeks. 4 years, the world had passed him by as if he didn't exist, but here, in this unexpected moment, he was seen, respected, even defended. Keanu's words didn't erase the hardship of his life, but they stitched back a piece of dignity that cruelty had torn away. That was the true gift, the real victory. Then, Keanu turned to face the bully one last time. He didn't advance, didn't loom, didn't brandish his fists the way action films might demand. Instead, he stood still, his dark eyes locking onto the bully's, unflinching and steady. "How you treat the weakest defines who you are," he said, his voice quiet but carrying the weight of an unshakable truth. "Tonight, you showed everyone exactly who you are. Maybe that's the lesson you needed." The words didn't sound like anger, they sounded like judgment, like a verdict passed down by someone who understood both suffering and resilience. The bully flinched, his lips tightening as if he wanted to argue, but no words came. He couldn't. The audience wasn't on his side anymore, and deep down, he knew Keanu was right. The shame settled into him like a heavy cloak he couldn't shrug off. A murmur rippled through the small crowd that had formed. Some people nodded, others exchanged looks of quiet awe. One woman whispered to her friend, "That's Keanu Reeves." Recognition spread quickly, and with it came an added weight to the moment. It wasn't just a stranger stepping in, it was a man the world admired, a man whose life had been shaped by tragedy and resilience, using his presence to shield someone else from cruelty. The bully's humiliation deepened. What had begun as a petty display of power had turned into a viral story unfolding in real time, one he couldn't control. Instant karma had already arrived, but the true punishment would come later, when the footage spread online, when strangers across the world replayed his cruelty and his collapse side by side with Keanu's quiet strength. Keanu gave one final look, steady, measured, final, before turning back to the homeless man. He placed a hand on his shoulder again, gave him a nod of reassurance, and then began walking down the street with the same calm pace with which he had arrived. He didn't look back. He didn't need to. His work here was done, and the lesson would linger long after his footsteps faded into the night. The bully remained rooted in place, unable to shake the sting of his exposure, while the homeless man sat clutching both the money and the memory of a kindness he had thought the world had forgotten. And the crowd, still buzzing in low voices, knew they had witnessed something rare, a kind of revenge that didn't rely on fists or fury, but on dignity, truth, and the quiet power of a man who had turned pain into purpose. It was a lesson that would last, not just for the bully, but for everyone who had seen it.